Welcome to the House of Brand, where we help unleash the true potential of your brand. If you're a business owner, leader, or C-suite executive and you're ready to scale your business to new heights, you're in the right place. I'm Tori Azure, your guide in turning your brand into a strategic advantage for your company. In each episode, we get straight to the heart of what it takes to build a brand that drives growth, that shapes culture, and fuels your marketing efforts. So let's get started. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of House of Brand. Excited for today's episode. We're gonna, in the past and leading up to this episode, we've talked a lot about understanding how to define brand and really, trying to define that so people have an understanding of how we view brand here at House of Brand and also our agency, BrandCraft. But today's different. Today we're gonna talk about how we bring a brand to market, and one specific area of that, how we bring a brand to market, how we find the audience, and what happens during that audience finding process. And with that, today I'd like to welcome Brady Heid. Brady's a part of BrandCraft. Over the years, Brady's partnered with a diverse range of clients, from national healthcare information providers and national furniture retailers to your local dentists in a town close to you, crafting innovative strategies for B2B and B2C markets. So welcome, Brady.
Thank you.
Anything I missed there? Anything you want to tell people
I think it was
about?
an electric intro. I appreciate it.
I agree. That was only a small part. I left out all the personal details, and especially one Brady said he needed to fix in his bio. So I'll let you.
Yeah, we forgot the intro music too, but that's all right.
Oh, what did you want it to be? Was it Miley Cyrus again? Or
That's not supposed to go on here.
all right, wave that one up.
No, I was kidding. No, I was. We were talking about an electric entrance. I think the only thing that could have made it better was just a powerful walk-up song.
Yeah, I agree. That makes everything better, and probably would make our performance better today if we did that.
Next time.
So, next time. When we work with clients, especially on brand, we often define the ideal client profile. I know you have read a lot of those. You've also had brought in front of you ideal client profiles and personas on brands that we didn't create, but where they bring it into our agency. Of course, depending on the complexity of the organization, that could, be. I was speaking about ideal client profiles, which often is all we have for a client. Sometimes we don't get down to the persona level. It just really depends on the client. But of course, that ICP can be broken down into personas. Those have much more information that would help a digital team. So Brady, defining an audience and a persona is important. What are some of the ways you use an audience and that ICP information at the early stages when we're developing a strategy with the client?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, to be general, it's really one of the most important things that we can do when creating strategy. It's kind of the basis for everything that we do moving forward. So when we get a good understanding of who a specific client's customers are, we can really kind of start off on the right foot. And the reason I say that is because every audience is different. Mm-hmm. Every audience is interacting on social media platforms or on Google in different ways. And so starting with the ICP or just a overall understanding of an audience, knowing if that's people who work in professional services or who are, just general consumers, will give us a really good idea of where do we need to be, what does this messaging need to look like, what does our creative need to look like, how are these people going to react when they get to certain pages on our website. So, without being too general, it's one of the most important things that we can do and understand to get started off on the right foot.
So how often do we work with clients? I'm not always involved with all of the clients, especially on the digital side. I'm not involved with all of the clients in most of it, but if someone comes to us and says, hey, I'm trying to grow this company, we want to do some digital marketing, which is often what they say. They don't even know what exactly they want to do. But what happens if they don't really know their audience or persona? Like, walk me through how we might try and get that information from them.
A lot of them don't know that.
Mm-hmm.
They think they have a pretty good idea of who their customer base is, but when you ask them, what do these people think about your product? How do they appreciate your business more than others, or what separates you from your competition in your client's eyes? And they don't know those answers, which isn't a bad thing, but that's kind of, another area where we can help and try and figure out let's start from the very basics. What is your typical demographic? We're talking age, gender, household income. But again, that still doesn't give us a ton of information that we need to know. So from there, we really try and figure out, what is the difference between your clients and maybe your customers' clients, or your customers and your customers, or your competitors' customers, and try and dive deeper from there. Really, you just have to poke the bear. If you ask enough questions, you're going to get the answers that you're looking for. Is your product something that your audience needs? Is it something that your audience wants? Is it something that's going to solve a problem or be a solution? And the more questions that you ask like that, it just gives you a better idea of who their customers are or who their clients are.
Yeah, I think this is a really good correlation between brand and that go-to-market strategy, is that we're trying to solve a lot of that for our clients during the brand process because we know the questions are going to come later. And also the best messaging that we could come up with and the best promise and the best unique value always is one that resonates with that ideal client the best. So it's funny that once you get, if a client doesn't go through our brand process, but they just get into the activation stage, which is marketing, a lot of the questions you guys ask and bring them are the same things we do in brand. It's the same question. You're just trying to, and I was thinking as you were saying that, actually I was thinking of a client that we had that I know as soon as I say this, you're going to know who it was, but some clients are as simple as saying, just make the phone ring.
Yeah.
Right? Do you remember that client?
Yep.
So the just make the phone ring client basically thinks, look, we're not that different. This is just what we do. And you say, who's your customer? And he was in home services, and he would say, well, I mean, anybody with a house, really. That's
right.
So we have to figure out that maybe that's not the case. Maybe that's not who the ideal client is, and how can we message it? They were pretty exclusively on AdWords, if I remember right. So we took a more tactical, very intent-based approach with them.
Yeah, but I mean, we run into that fairly often. Maybe it's not just as general as let's make the phone ring, but it's, hey, our clients or our customers are typically 25 to 40, and they do these couple things, and that's about all we know about them. And that doesn't help. I mean, that gets us started, but it doesn't really help us actually narrow down who their audience is and make sure we're showing their ads to the people who are going to be most interested in
This
them.
is such a good point. Why is a narrow? See, I think our clients on the activation stage are just as scared of narrowing down the audience as they are on the brand side when we try and tell them who's your ideal client. What they want to say is everybody, and we say that's not good enough. It can't. That's actually worse than if we define it. And it sounds like the same thing on the when you go to activation, which is, hey, the more narrow we can make this audience, why is that better?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of reasons, but when we're talking about ad spend, we're putting hard-earned dollars into advertising, and when you want everyone to be your client, well, not everyone's going to be interested in what you're selling or what you're offering. So if we just start showing, maybe it's really good creative and maybe it's really good messaging, but it's not resonating with a specific audience, then what we're doing is we're wasting money almost. We're not showing the right thing to the right people. Like, for example, if, and this isn't an extreme example, but if you were scrolling through Facebook and you saw a lip gloss advertisement, and maybe it's the best lip gloss there is out there, you're going to keep right on scrolling.
Right.
But if you are scrolling through Facebook and you see something about tailor-made golf clubs or Scotty Cameron putter, boom, your interest is piqued. You might click on it. You're going to watch the video, and that is a big difference between everyone is my audience versus I know I have a very small audience, so let's spend as much of my budget as I can on the specific people who I know are going to be interested in what I'm selling.
Yeah, so you get more out of your ad spend.
Exactly.
You can take whatever your ad spend is and say reduce waste as much as we can, and that's a really important one. Now the other thing you brought up, which is seeing relevant information in my Facebook feed, especially when it comes to paid advertising, is probably the subject of like a whole nother podcast of just how much more difficult that's become for you guys activating these campaigns, because I think more data has been taken away in the last 5 years than has been given. So it's much more difficult now to be that targeted on the activation side. So lately in our agency, Brady, we've been talking a lot about finding the audience. In fact, there's probably a bigger announcement down the road more about this, finding your audience, but as our primary driver and not trying to talk to clients immediately about the channel. So in the past, clients would come in and they say, hey, I heard I needed to run some AdWords, or I should do AdWords, or, well, we need an AdWords vendor, we needed this vendor, we need that vendor. So everything was by channel. How much money should we spend in this channel? How much money should we do this? That's not completely gone away. But we are trying to have conversations and think about it differently when we just say, the channel is important, but it's complex and we need to be nimble. And why is the audience, when we talk about audience, what do we mean by that? And maybe I don't know if you believe that the audience is more important than the channel, but why is audience a different conversation than the channel?
I guess to answer this in short, and then I'll kind of get in a little bit longer, but your audience dictates your channel. And the reason I say that, like one example is maybe we're talking about a financial advisor, and pretty easy for someone to go in and type in, financial advisor near me or wealth management near me. But then you kind of listen to your client and say, well, our audience doesn't know who we are. They might be searching these terms, but they don't know who we are. So in my mind, I'm already thinking, okay, well, maybe we will have a Google search presence, but clearly what I'm being told is that the specific audience that we're trying to target is they have a need to learn about who these people are before they might be searching for it. So an awareness play, maybe we'll get into Facebook or Instagram. Again, your audience defines your channel. Is it a B2B service? Then most likely we're going to be in LinkedIn. Maybe in programmatic as well, but areas where we can be a lot more specific about things like job title or industry or job function or company revenue. Things like that are big decision makers in what channels we're going to use. And another thing I like to think a bit about is, are we creating the intent or are we capturing the intent? A lot of times we are capturing intent, and that is, not the most difficult thing. It's not easy either, but capturing intent just means we're showing an ad where they're literally asking us for it. A good example of this is dentists and lawyers. People need dentists, people need lawyers. We just want to make sure we are showing up on the Google search results when they tell us that. But creating intent, things like, different B2B services, I think we'll get into some a little bit later, but really kind of trying to educate and inform whoever is watching this or scrolling through their platforms that, hey, you do need this. Hey, this is a service or a product that will, help you or help your business. So creating intent versus capturing intent is also kind of a big driver in what channel we use when it comes to the audience.
Yeah, that's and these are things that we, as an agency have been really talking to our clients about and thinking about, which is we do have a lot of these industries, and you mentioned two of them, law and dentistry, which tend to live a lot in that high intent space. Like they're just trying to capture intent all the time. And part of the reason they do it though is because it works. Like that's just the long and short of it.
Right.
But we've been trying to talk to them and say, hey, what could happen to your growth as a company if not only did we capture intent, but also we went out there and created some, and we got some people interested in your brand, whatever that meant. And just making sure that we're unique. For BrandCraft, what we've talked about is saying, hey, like part of the way that we can create some of that intent is to go out to market and talk about issues that businesses might be having and say, hey, did you ever think that maybe that's a brand or a marketing problem? And so introducing that thought process to them, see if we can engage with them, and then maybe make them, a higher intent type of client. So platforms, we're talking right now audience versus platform. So platforms out there that we market to for the most part is pretty diverse. We do programmatic, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, we currently right now don't have a lot of clients on the TikTok, or do we have any on TikTok currently?
Not currently, but I think that's just kind of a more reflection of the types of clients that we have right now. Not as many e-commerce, but TikTok is still a very powerful platform that, if we had the right clients at the moment, I think TikTok would be one of our top
and
platforms.
I think TikTok is a good example of a platform that has a ton of users, and also like if you look at what's happening in political climate in the U.S., you really never know what's going to happen with a channel. Like you just better be ready to pivot, because you could be having a great success with TikTok, let's say, and then the government decides they're not going to allow it in the U.S. That would be detrimental to a lot of
100%.
of very companies that are really putting
influencers
a lot of
as well.
Yeah. I mean, some of them would have their platform just completely destroyed. So that's unfortunate. Looking more at the channels now, moving away from audience, but keeping audience in mind. When we go to the specific channels, you kind of touched on this, but like, how is like pay-per-click, like Google AdWords or Microsoft advertising on the pay-per-click side? How is that different than, let's say, a social campaign when it comes to both? Well, really when it comes to the audience, but also maybe intent as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it does go a little bit back to intent, but when it comes to Google PPC versus social, I think the first thing we have to think about is how urgent is it? Is it a need it now type of thing? Like, I guess, is it a need it now versus do I need to learn about it a little bit more before I make a decision on if I'm going to use something? So again, going back to creating intent and capturing intent. But once we kind of get into those channels, it is a lot about how we create the ads. Like is our audience going to resonate a lot more with some really cool visuals and longer descriptions, or is our product a little bit more geared towards an audience that needs a short descriptor on what they're going to get when they click on this ad?
Yeah.
Again, are we leaning towards PPC, or are we leaning towards social, or even really programmatic? But I don't know, you mentioned a little bit about refining the audience, and that's where these channels, I guess they have some overlap as well, but are different, because when we find our audience or what we think is our audience, that doesn't necessarily mean we're done, right? So you might have, again, back to this golf example.
Scotty Cameron putter.
Yeah. Maybe you just bought a putter, but there is, more golf brands that are promoting and falling onto your social feed. And while you might be in the golf category, you just bought a putter, so you don't need another putter. So golf.
But if I can jump in, that has never prevented me from buying another
That's
putter.
true. You have a lot of putters.
So, but finish your thought. Yes.
Yeah. But basically, you say you just bought a putter and you don't want any more putters. You're still going to get advertisements for a golf brand.
Yeah, when you talk about refining the audience, like how is that different on social, and how does that compare to like a Google AdWords type of situation?
That's a good question. So, on social platforms where we're really trying to go out and find our audience and tell Facebook and tell LinkedIn, like, hey, these are the people that we want seeing our ads. That doesn't necessarily mean that every single person in that category is going to become a client or a customer or buy our product or even click on our ad, because maybe they are in our segment. Like, let's go back to the golf example earlier. Maybe you have just bought a putter, and there's golf brand A, B, and C out there that are also selling putters, and you're interested in golf, so your Facebook is classified in the golf interests group. Well, these companies are still showing you ads, but since you just bought a putter, you're no longer interested. So that means you're in this audience, but you're not going to become a customer for them. And so how do we refine that? Well, we have to kind of figure out, like, the users within our audience, which of those types of people are more interested in what we're offering. And we can do that in a couple of different ways. On social, for example, maybe we have some video ads, and we're saying that, hey, well, I know that anyone that watches at least 50 or 75% of this video really shows some interest in what we're watching. You know, it's a 30-second video, so if they just don't scroll right past it, they at least had some kind of interest in what we're showing. So we can create an audience based off that. Or we can create an audience based off of who clicked on our ads, or just general people who got to the website. And what we can do with that audience is kind of take them down a path of showing the next thing, you know, whether that is a discount or a more information on why they should purchase this, or go to your website and learn more information. You know, we can kind of take this bigger general audience that we said, hey, these guys most likely have interest in what you're selling, and bring it down to, hey, these guys have shown us that they have a lot of interest in what we're advertising right now.
Yeah, this is really cool and interesting because I think it goes to one of the tenets of defining your audience, and that is research. And a lot of market research is often done on that of not only maybe how much brand awareness exists out there, but also if people understand what products are delivered. And so they'll do a lot of research. And from that research, they'll say, hey, this is where we believe the consumer's thoughts are. And, you know, and for a mid-market and Fortune 500s, they have, you know, the budget to pull that off, and they have big enough campaigns that it fits within a budget. Sometimes the way we do it is what you're describing. We do our research by paying to place advertising, seeing who reacts to that, and then developing the audience. It's almost a way to test and develop audiences and understand what their needs are by allowing them to tell us, like, hey,
Right.
yeah, we're super interested. We watched this video. Either the content's great, or you got the right audience. So what you hope is that you just keep working that, you keep finding that. So that's a great way to do it. If you don't, there used to be something I would do back early in my career too, where we would take Google AdWords data, so we'd run a lot of different keywords, and then we'd use that, which are performing well, to then move that over to the SEO side and say, well, that must be what there is converting and what's resonating. Let's move that over to SEO and start to SEO the site up. Right. So you can use any of this data. It's your data. I mean, once you have it to use however you might see fit. All right, let's go over some examples from our agency, and we'll just go over 3 clients quickly.
Okay.
And we're not going to use any names of companies. Okay, so our first client is a family office, and this is on the investment side or wealth management side. So if you don't know, a family office is really for, I don't know if I'd categorize them as the ultra wealthy, but a lot of people might say it's the ultra wealthy.
We talk about them as the ultra high net worth families.
Ultra high net worth, yeah. They need more than just someone that just helps with them with their investments. They also handle.
This particular client, I think their minimums are about 15 million in liquid assets.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so the difference in a family office is they manage your total wealth profile, basically. You know, and they could go as deep as also making sure that, I mean, and this is true, there's some family offices that make sure the dog gets to the vet, that make sure our client stays really in the wealth category. That's really what they're in. But all those details are not really needed. What's really needed is you have a general idea now of what the client is. This seems like a really hard audience. So we're hired basically as a marketing firm, a strategic marketing firm. We got hired to basically say, hey, we want to bring new people into the brand. We're doing some expansion, and we want to go into these new markets, and we want to find these people that fit this category and bring them into the brand. There's not really a whole lot different whether the client is a $15 million net worth or higher person, or if they're looking for a putter. Some of the same things are there. The thing is with this is, why is it so difficult? What is different about it? Because there are differences. What is different, and why is it more difficult to find or to get this client to convert?
First of all, yes, it's difficult. Starting on the Google side, you know, it's really hard to get an exclusivity type of feel with someone just searching for, you know, financial investment firms or financial advisors. Of course, there's ways that we can kind of try and drag out some of these keywords a little bit to make sure that, hey, let's try and find people who are a little bit further down the funnel and know exactly what they're looking for. But you'll still get, you know, maybe someone like me who's just looking for a financial advisor. And that's just because of what they've typed in. And so now how do we create our ad copy to be so exclusive that we are limiting someone like me from clicking on this? So that's one challenge right there.
That seems like a big challenge.
It's probably one of the biggest on the Google search side. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we'll go in and check our search terms after we negate all these more general types of searches that, someone who is just a middle class person is probably going to be searching. And there's still ways that all of these different searches can trigger some of our ads.
Yeah.
And, maybe make us spend on a click that isn't even close to someone who would become a client. On the Google side, what we can also do is adjust the demographics targeting. So I can say, anyone who is not in the top 10 percentage of average household income, I don't want clicking on our ads. But then what we do there is really kind of decrease the volume, and that doesn't even solve the problem, because some of the time the average household income is based on where these people live, and what their jobs are. And so some of these people have millions of dollars that don't have jobs, so they aren't classified in the average household income.
Yeah.
So then we're missing out on those people. So it's just like a back and forth battle.
While that's true, all we can be is, we're not exact. So we have to be generally accurate. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we're very educated accurate. In other words, we get really good because we know enough data to put something together. We're like, okay, we pretty much know that audience. This reminded me of like fishing. Like if a client came to us and said, hey, I want to go out, I want to go fishing, and I don't want to catch a lot of fish. I just want to catch the biggest fish. And you're like, well, to catch the biggest fish, we might have to catch some of the smaller ones first. We got to figure out where all the fish are. And it's impossible really to say, we'll take you out fishing, but we're only going to catch the big fish. Right. And educating clients on that sometimes is difficult because they see every small fish as wasted time and ad spend.
Right.
And they're like, well, we just want the big ones. And we're like, yeah, but we got to fish at least where we know that there's fish. Then we got to go for the big ones.
Exactly. All of these are learning opportunities for us on the marketing side to really say like, okay, this is working and this isn't working. This creative, this audience, this headline, this text, it really led to clicks that we didn't see very much engagement on the website. So let's take what we learned here and go to the next segment and let's figure out how do we get better. It definitely is in terms of ad testing like that. I think it's a little bit easier to tell on the LinkedIn side, and finding this audience, while still extremely difficult, we have a lot more levers to pull on the LinkedIn side. Yeah. I think I mentioned a little bit earlier things like company size and company revenue, but then layering over job titles, or not necessarily job titles, but maybe job functions like CEO, CFO, just the CXO, whatever they are, high level executives in some larger businesses that, we know, hey, they're definitely going to have some money. Are they going to have enough? Are they going to be interested in us? Well, that's what we need to figure out with ad testing and testing what our audience is resonating with. Because until we start, we don't always know. Yeah.
So this particular client, I could say that they were prepared for the long haul, which was good. There was some, like any client like this, where you're trying to really push them into something they haven't done before. There were some times where it was tense and times where they wanted things moving faster, but ultimately they were patient. It took us a good year before we started seeing really a lot of traction with a client like that. And now we're moving into year 2 with them, and things are getting better. So sometimes you just have to keep at it. You have to keep, believing that what you're doing is going to work. And sometimes you're waiting, or you're hoping that the client also just has that patience, because you know that soon you'll uncover it.
Yeah, and it's not.
And for these, I'm talking about a lot of the tough ones, like a client like this.
Yeah, and when you mention time, it's not just that all of this stuff got better over a year. It's that the testing that we've done on the audiences, the stuff that we've learned from the creatives that are working and the headlines that aren't working, and just all of this kind of tiny little incremental steps towards figuring out this is where our audience is, and this is what they're resonating with.
Yeah.
And we're still working on that. We're still getting better. But over the long haul, if maybe from month to month you look at it and you're like, man, we're not really, this is tough. We're not performing great. Like, eventually stuff's going to catch back up to us, and then you get a year down the road and you look back to where you were the year before, and it's like, dang, we made some progress.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's always success stories. I think on the downside is when a client is right, that we think they're right there, but then they give up on it. And they're, I mean, I get it. Like, there's investment. It's not just time. There's also cash investment these companies are putting in every month so that we can continue to refine and build this testing. So I get it when they lose patience. I just know there's been times where a client said, hey, we want to either, slow down a little bit or move away from this. And you're just like, dang it, I feel like we're right there. We're right about to have a breakthrough. All right, I'm going to skip the second one. I think we need to wrap this up. I'm going to move to our health information sharing software client. So they are a fairly large client, I would say emerging mid-market type client. Good revenue. They had recently went through an acquisition during this process. But tell me a lot about the challenge. They were also, if I can give a little bit of background, they are very well internally organized and have a lot of internal marketing support. We were really there to help them in their channels, like get better performance out of their channels. So talk a little bit about this client and then how we helped them once we knew like what their personas were, go find these.
Yeah. This is a healthcare information sharing software. So basically, if you have a doctor's appointment and then you have a physical therapy appointment and then a doctor's appointment somewhere else, all this information can be shared, so everyone's up to date at the same time. But like you said, what we were doing for them, I mean, this was a brand that they really knew who their audience was, and they were tasking us to find that audience. But because this was such a niche and specific product or service, it was really challenging. We, for the most part, we were in LinkedIn. We did some Google stuff as well. But on the LinkedIn side, the tough part was we were going after people in the medical field. But what we couldn't have was impressions for people who were the actual executors in the medical field, the nurses, the doctors, the dentists, the physical therapists, all of those types of people. That wasn't our audience. Those people can't make decisions on what their bigger company is using for whatever they're entering their notes in, and making sure that they're updating medication and stuff like that. We had to find the people who were executives at these larger scale businesses that owned hospitals, that owned skilled nursing facilities and senior living facilities, and that was difficult. And again, it was done through a lot of testing, a lot of adding job industries and negating job functions and job titles, making sure that we weren't just going after managerial positions. We were going after people in the executive suite. So that was a real challenge right there, was finding people who worked in the medical field who weren't working in the medical field, who were on the business side of the medical field.
You're trying to find the buyer.
Exactly.
And not just, so we have to turn that audience into a buyer, is kind of what you're saying, which is we have this audience, we know who the ideal client is, we know what they do, we even know what their persona is, but what do they look like on LinkedIn? And some of this is garbage in, garbage out. Hey, we've all been on a LinkedIn profile, I'm sure you have, where you get someone maybe, and you go look at it, and you're like, that's not what they do anymore. They don't even do that anymore.
Right.
And that's not ever what they did. I'm not sure that exists that much, but LinkedIn is a lot of self-reporting. This is what I do. This is what my job is. And so for the most part, it's accurate. I think it's tested against, just peers. Like peers can see like, oh, I see what you're, doing or not doing. So it's a great platform for that. This is a great example though of a client that had a very defined audience. And the challenge for us wasn't whether it was defined or not. It was, gosh, how do we go find them?
Exactly. And
then how do we find out like who's making this decision to take the first meeting with us or with our client? And that's always that process. One thing I think, no, go ahead, Brady.
And it was potentially a year-long or more sales cycle. So what we got back was kind of tough to understand if it was working or if it wasn't. Okay, maybe someone made a phone call or signed up for a demo, but by the time that person becomes a client of this specific industry or agency or business, it was almost like by then, what did we do? Who was this client? It's so hard to really figure out, like, with a sales cycle that long, what's working.
Yeah, it's so much different. It's so much different than other industries. Like if you were dealing with an e-commerce product, let's say that was in the $25 to $50 category, but it's in a lower price point, one that's going to have a lot of volume compared to even what we're talking about, which is very low volume. But to go back to the fishing analogy, you're more like taking a net on the e-commerce side and scooping fish up, and your data's coming in so fast that you can start to make decisions and understand what's happening. Right. So that's when I was saying back, the technique isn't that much different actually between both of those.
Right.
But it's easier, it happens much faster when you have a lot more volume.
Exactly.
You can make so many decisions and more data is coming in. And so we have to rely more on strategy and it's more than intuition. It is our intelligence about what we've done in the past for on these really difficult clients with the high price points and the lower volume. We really have to put a lot of work into making sure that we hone those in before we spend a lot of money, because we don't get a ton of feedback.
Yep.
All right, well, cool. Thanks, Brady. I think this was a great discussion. I look forward to having more of these about how brand is applied and how brand can take you. And our tie on this episode was how brand and the audience and that brand, that ideal client, can be carried over to digital. So with that, thank you guys for watching, and stay tuned for the next episode of House of Brand.